Hello and welcome to another lockdown edition of Ace Fairy Tales with Elizabeth. And today I'd like to talk to you not about a specific tale, but I'd like to talk to you about a theme that's cropped up in a lot of the tales, especially in the new second collection that we're crowdfunding. And that's the theme of birds and wings. And I just happen to be right here where there's a feather, probably one the cat brought. She likes collecting feathers sometimes. I'll put that back where it was. Some of you might remember, if you've read the first book, Asexual Fairy Tales, you might remember the story of Celandine and Troilus there, which is a sort of Sleeping Beauty / Rapunzel story. And in that story, Troilus comes in the tower, the supposedly inaccessible tower, through the window of the gods on the back of a mysterious bird man who probably is some sort of god. And the bird, it's a very powerful symbol, and it's quite often a symbol of the spiritual because birds fly in the air, etc., and you sort of got the contrast between the spiritual and the physical. And that symbol, I wrote about this in my Folklore Thursday piece about women in the tower, that there's a whole section on where the lover comes through the window in the form of a bird, and it really takes us back into mythical territory. In the Breton lay of Yonec, the hero flies in the form of a bird. And in the Rose of the Alhambra, which is one of the stories in the new collection of Myths and Tales, Rios is following a gerfalcon hunting his hawking, and his hawk flies off and it flies in through the tower of the Infantas in the Alhambra Palace, and following that he finds the maiden Jacinta in the tower. Sorry, just moving some notifications there. And that's, I think, harking back to that idea, and I think it is it takes us into mythical territory, and I think it is taking us into the idea that the god or the gods are able to enter through closed doors, through inaccessible windows, that God can reach you anywhere. And there's that link even to Christian iconography of the Holy Spirit as a dove, and coming, for example, to the Virgin Mary, and with that link to virgin births. And I think that's something that I was trying to get across in my version of Celandine and Troilus. And you'll know that virgin births and parthenogenesis and that sort of thing, it's very much another recurring thing, but we won't go there today. In another story that I've got in the Myths and Tales book is Cupid and Psyche, where a winged god, again, visits the heroine unseen at night. So that fits in with that whole sort of bird as a spiritual, bird as God, if you like. But then we've got another idea in I've got a version of The Little White Bird in the second book, which is a book by Jane Barry, who wrote Peter Pan, and it's a book that has his first sort of iteration of Peter Pan in it, although I haven't used the Peter Pan bits, they're sort of copyright, but I've used other parts of the story, and we learn that that the souls of children, or our children, are birds. So this isn't so much of a god, but this is more the souls of people, and this is the children exist as birds before they exist as children. You do get a little bit of that getting reused in the story of Peter Pan. Hence he's still in touch with the fairies, hence he can fly, etc. And the narrator, who is a single man, this is an interesting contrast. He wants to be a father, and if he could have caught a bird in the park, then he could have had a child, but he can't, because only women ever seem to be able to catch these birds. Men can't catch a bird. It's an interesting longing there. And this links in with another story in the Myths and Tales book, The Asexual Planet, which is based on an episode from George MacDonald's Fantastes. He was a Victorian fairy tale writer and a big influence on C.S. Lewis. And he was a mentor to Lewis Carroll as well. imagine that. And in this episode, a traveller finds a distant planet where the women have wings instead of arms, and it's a completely asexual planet, and the women they find babies in natural spots, but it's only the women that find the babies, and it's the women that have the wings again. It's interesting. Very interesting symbolism. You don't always know what it means, but it's really fascinating how it all interconnects. But then in the final story of the New Myths and Tales book, it's one that I wrote myself, and it's kind of the other way around, because in the asexual planet they have wings, but in the wingless wedding it's the asexual characters or people on that planet that don't have wings, and the other people have wings, and that's because it's based on another story of parthenogenesis. It's actually based on the dual life cycle of gall wasps, which sounds a bit weird, but I became very fascinated by these asexual gall wasps, and I wanted to experiment with what would happen with sort of a more humanoid type characters. So that sort of brings us all the way back, and then finally you've got that idea of the bird as freedom, which is quite an easy to grasp concept, which the story I talked about last time, The Children of Wax, the brother at the end becoming a bird and being able to fly free. And that also reminds us of Princess Kaguya, who was in the Asexual Fairy Tales, and when she goes back to the moon, she dons her cloak of feathers and then flies up to the moon. She's going back to the gods. So we've done the whole cycle with the gods coming down, and we've got the whole going back up to the gods at the end. So I hope you liked that little brief whistle-stop tour of the theme of birds and wings. Do tell me if you'd like me to do another one about interconnecting themes in the stories, because there's lots of them and I find them very fascinating. Thank you to everyone that's supported our Kickstarter so far. Please keep pledging, please share it with your friends, and I'll see you later.